hope and faith just kept showing up and showing up and showing up in a lot of different places. So let me skip past this real quick here. And Karen, who we haven't listened to for a while. And, you know, hope and faith, some people have said that the main point of religion is to give people hope, you know, to give us some reason to get up in the morning and keep going on. I found this particular quote of Paul's in Romans. And of course, he's talking about the hope, you know, through the resurrection in Jesus. But I find that when we talk, I love this little piece of this where he talks about that, you know, sometimes our suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope. You know, and to me, as somebody in recovery, I really relate to that. I wouldn't wish what I went through on anybody. And I know all of us who are going through all of the things that we are going through, and boy, you know, are we all going through it at one, you know, level or another, or a couple of levels, or a whole handful of them. You know, the things that we learn and the character that we now have. I probably told this story to you guys before, but my first sponsor in Florida, you know, we're sitting at a meeting one night, and three different new people came in, and in addition to being alcoholic, they all three had recently been diagnosed with hepatitis C, and they were scared, you know. And so Jay, who had, you know, has had a tremendous amount of health issues, including being positive for Hep C, told his story and told about how he'd gotten over it, essentially, that, you know, he'd done all the things that he was supposed to do, and it had been knocked down to the point where they can no longer detect it on his blood tests. And so he and I'm like the world's worst sponsee. I never call my sponsor, but what Jay and I used to do is after the meetings, we'd go outside and he'd smoke cigarettes and we'd swat mosquitoes and we'd talk. And so we were having our after meeting like we usually did. And at one point he just took a big drag on a cigarette and said, "Well, now I know why I have hepatitis C." And I was like, "Why, Jay?" And he said, "So I could help those people tonight." That, you know, that may not feel good when you're going through something. It's like, "Oh, I got this." So, you know, I mean, it's like, why does anybody have to go through this? And you know, that's the Odyssey. Why do bad things happen to good people? But the simple fact that somehow in the middle of all this crap that we're going through, we can still find hope, which is, you know, kind of the beginning of getting to faith. It's at least, it's something we can cling to when we don't feel like we can cling to anything else. You know, and then Paul also says in his, you know, writing to the Hebrews, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And that's I know in Unity Theology, that particular verse is considered pretty critical, and I'll kind of get to that real quickly here. We look at things metaphysically. I thought this was interesting. Charles Fillmore, in his Revealing Word, which is it's like an appendix to the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, whereas the Bible Dictionary is people and places. The Revealing Word is about things, non-proper nouns, and, you know, like light or angel or idea, or an idea like hope or faith. And he says it's the expectation of good in the future. And you know what? That's better than no expectation of good in the future. That's better than believing nothing good's ever going to happen to us again. And I know I've been there. You know, I've been at the bottom of that well of depression, and felt like, you know, this is it. I mean, if I'm going to keep living, it's basically going to be a big long punishment. So hope is important. And even though Charles says that it's good as far as it goes, it's of the sense mind, because it's subject to time. It's not eternal the way that faith is eternal. Faith is the certain knowledge that our good is, in the infinite now, that it's not subject to linear time. Faith is nonlinear, whereas hope is linear, I guess is the way to view it. But then metaphysically, faith is, and this is again from Charles in The Revealing Word, the perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance. And he actually pulls his idea for this from the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, if you can see how he pulled that out of there. The perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance. Yeah. So he seems to be suggesting that hope is in some way inferior to faith. Is it? And my question would be, hey, is it even possible to have faith without hope? And at some level, even if it's our subconscious mind, isn't faith necessary for hope? Anybody?
Sorry, I was muted. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm cogitating.
All right. Well, and that's something just, even if we don't discuss it right now, because I know we're already over on time. There's something to think about.
I'll weigh in. I don't think that faith is necessary for hope, because I've gone without faith for a long time without being hopeless.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to think that it's like, okay, so if you've ever listened to, the Abraham Hicks stuff, there was one of their lessons, they described the gamut of human emotional conditions, and it's like 22 states that range from utter hopelessness down at the bottom to joy at the top. And it's like all the way up, and it's like they tell you can't get from deepest, darkest depression to joy in one jump. You kind of have to go up through some of the emotions. So it's very common when we talk about the grief process. There are levels of it that we get to. You can't just go from being deeply in grief to being over it. You make your way up through it. And to me, from being, faithless and hopeless and just, you got nothing, to suddenly say, oh, hey, well, now that you told me about Jesus, I have faith. I don't think that, maybe some people have a white light experience and it happens to them. Good for them. Wouldn't have worked for me. I need to at least have hope before I have faith, and that's just me. But anyway, so I thought it was interesting when I always dig in. I always like to see what Jesus says about stuff. And if so, how much does he talk about it, and in what way does he talk about it, and to whom does he talk about it? It's interesting that Jesus himself really does not talk about hope. He only uses the word hope twice in the Christian scriptures. The other two times in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, somebody else is speaking when that word comes up. And, the times that he does say it, he's talking about, somebody else, like, Moses's was your help or something. He's not teaching us about hoping, but he does teach us a lot about faith. And you can see the difference. So in the Gospels, 4 times, but 77 times total. And in most of those cases, it's Paul writing about Jesus being our hope. But then faith is mentioned, 11 times as much in the Gospels and almost 300 times total in the rest of the scriptures. So just a real quick take on faith. And that idea that, Fillmore had said that it's the perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance. So when you say, okay, what's substance? And what he says is it's an idea in divine mind, an attribute of being. It's a spiritual essence out of which all things are made. It's visible and comprehensible to the mind, but the five senses of man cannot apprehend it. So Fillmore had this whole theology that he had based primarily on A, the Bible, and B, on Newtonian physics. He was a smart guy, but he was operating with limited knowledge at the time. So most of his theology is law-based, because that's Newtonian physics. It's the first law, the second law, the third law. If this, then that. It's very cause and effect based. And I thought it was really interesting. When he talks about substance, he's actually going back to a theory of physics they had back then that relied on something they called the ethers, which was a theory that eventually was disproven. And, we discovered quantum theory and things kind of changed pretty radically. But if you take that exact same quote, the perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance, and you think about it in terms of quantum physics. So, I think all of us have probably heard of the observer effect, which it was basically, they started off trying to look at something as a particle. Is it a particle? Is it a wave? Can't be a particle and a wave at the same time. It's got to be one or the other. So if we look for a wave and we find a wave, and then we look for a particle and find a particle, then in some way or another, our observing it must have changed it. And I think we all know, that kind of the key idea that how we look at our world changes our world, no matter what's going on in it. And I keep using, the example of the two soldiers in the mud pit, because it's so good. One of them's having the worst day of his life. The other one's having the time of his life. And they're in the same mud pit, right? But physically, and we've talked about the universe as the holographic universe, that basically this whole thing is energy. And it's projected. And I went down a rabbit hole looking at that, and we don't have time to get into it. But the idea, I think, that is important for us to remember is that at the very least, faith can be said to move us in a direction within the field of quantum probabilities, right? If we take, I told Laura, so in a regular compass, it's 360 degrees. Well, the ones we have in the Army, we divide into 6,400 mils. And some of that has to do with how you aim artillery. And some of it has to do with the fact that when you go walking off in a direction, after a couple of miles, being off by 1 or 2 degrees is having to change where you walk to and walk a whole lot extra difference. Being off by 1 or 2 mils, you don't have to, your mistake is not so big, right? So if we think of the universe as being, a sheaf of quantum probabilities in a couple different dimensions, our faith and our intention will at least point us in the direction of those probabilities that are maybe more along the line of what we wanted. The first time I told Laura I loved her, it felt like jumping through a window into a new universe. Because I had known her through church, because I had actually performed her wedding to her previous husband, I could have just said, you know what, that's a line I shouldn't cross. Even though we've become friends, even though we've gotten to really know each other as people, maybe I shouldn't do that, right? And maybe there are some quantum universes out there where I didn't follow my heart. And I don't even want to think about Charles living in those universes. But when I made that decision to say, I love you, it was just like the universe shifted. It was like I could feel it. And it was like walking out into a new sheaf of realities. And now, a whole universe of possibilities exists because I had hope and I had faith, and I stepped forward into that. And, you know, now we get to look at those quantum probabilities instead of the, you know, the other ones in that universe of being alone that I left behind. So I think it's important for us, even when things are dark, to continue to groom our hope and to do our best to exercise our faith muscles. And as I said, that I kept getting these messages this week about hope and about faith. And, you know, it would come in on people's memes on Facebook, or, you know, posts in the Unity Minister discussion group, or just something that I saw on CNN. And, you know, then today I open up my email and I actually get this message, you know, in my inbox. And this is from Joe Biden's campaign. And this quote in it, it says, "Now is the time for us to come together to choose hope over fear, to give people the light." And I was like, thanks, Joe. That's kind of, you know, that kind of sums it up. To choose hope over fear and to give people the light. And as much as things have been getting us down, as many challenges as we're facing, and as dark a time as we are living through right now, we have to remember to choose hope over fear, to use our hope to get to our faith, and to step into, you know, the universe that we want to create. So